Okay, good morning and welcome to this Baltic Breakfast seminar and webinar. We're going to be talking about the Gulf of Riga herring today, the only healthy herring stock in the Baltic Sea. My name is Charles Berkow. I'm a policy analyst at the Baltic Sea Center at Stockholm University. I'll be moderating today. And just a few words about the Baltic Sea Center. We have 3 areas of operation. That's research, where we do modeling, analysis, and synthesis. We have infrastructure that's used by researchers both at the Stockholm University and other universities, both in Sweden and outside. And we work on communication and policy analysis. And there we have a number of different products that we use with the aim of trying to help bridge the gap between science and policy. We're really lucky today to have Olavi, Kaljuste, and Ivars Putnis to talk with us because they've both worked on surveys of the Gulf of Riga herring, and both published a number of works on the Gulf of Riga herring specifically, including a chapter in a book that came out this year or last year, chapter called The Management of the Gulf of Riga Herring, Lessons Learned and Challenges Ahead. And that's just the kind of questions that we want to be talking about today. So we're really glad to have you here. And that's it for me. And with that, we will turn the microphone over to Olavi, who is working at the SLU in Sweden, what is this called? And has studied and worked a lot at the University of Tartu. And here we go.
Thank you very much, and good morning. So I will present first, and then I give the word to my colleague Ivars. My presentation is divided in 3 different topics. First, I will give an overview about the development of Gulf of Riga herring compared to the other herring stocks in the Baltic. Then I shortly characterize the biological differences of the Gulf of Riga herring. And finally, I talk about the importance of assessment and management units matching the natural population structure. So I go to the first point then. At present, the Baltic herring is assessed and managed by the following stock units. Turn on the laser pointer. Okay, so we have the Western Baltic spring spawning herring. We have the Central Baltic herring. Then we have the Gulf of Bothnia herring, and finally we have the Gulf of Riga herring. On these figures is presented the development of all 4 herring stocks in the Baltic. The figures show the spawning stock biomass, recruitment abundance, fishing pressure, and catches. So here is the spawning stock biomass. Here is the recruitment. Here are the fishing pressure graphs, and finally the catches. You should notice that the time span on the figures is somewhat different for different stocks. Therefore, I have marked year 1922 with a red dashed line on each of the graphs. Then it's easier to follow them and compare. You also notice that on the graphs with spawning stock biomass and fishing pressure, there are some horizontal lines also. And these different horizontal lines represent stock-specific reference values, which basically show the stock tolerance level. If the stock is managed sustainably, then the spawning stock biomass values are above these lines, and the fishing pressure values should be below these lines. So if we look the Gulf of Riga herrings, which is the last row here. So the spawning stock biomass has increased from very low state to the historic high value recently, and the stock is in very good shape. And it's different from other stocks. If you look the recruitment graphs, then you see that for the Western Baltic herring and for the Central Baltic herring, the recruitment has decreased in time. At the same time, in the Gulf of Botnia, so there are no major changes in recruitment. So it's varying, but it's more or less the same level. But it's different story in the Gulf of Riga. So you can see that the recruitment has increased in time. If you look at the fishing pressure graphs, then you can see that for the Western Baltic herring and the Central Baltic herring, the fishing pressure has been too high for most of the time. If you look at the Botnian Sea, the Gulf of Botnia herring, then it has been mostly very low. Only recent 10 years it has been somewhat higher, but not very high either. But still, the stock has decreased a lot. So it's kind of a little bit mystery that there is no failure in recruitment and fishing pressure is not too high, but still the stock has gone down. If you look the fishing pressure in the Gulf of Riga, you can see that it has periodically been high, like in the beginning of the period, and then in the middle it has been high. And the rest of the time it's like moderate high, not very low either. But this relatively high fishing pressure has not affected the spawning stock biomass in the Gulf of Riga. So somehow this stock tolerates higher fishing pressure than the other stocks. So now I go and continue with characterization of the Gulf of Riga herring stocks, and I shortly give the overview about the behavior, maturation, spawning time and place, growth rate, and morphological features. If we go to the behavior description, then there is two broad types of herring natural populations in the Baltic. They can be divided into open sea herrings and the Gulf herrings. The Gulf herrings are usually throughout the year in the Gulfs, while the open sea herring populations, they perform migrations between the spawning grounds, which often are located in the Gulfs, and feeding and wintering areas in the Baltic proper. So these arrows here, they kind of indicate how the Central Baltic herring is migrating to spawn into the Gulfs and back. The Gulf of Riga herring and the Gulf of Putnis herrings are the most clearly distinguished Gulf herring stocks. Also, herring in the Gulf of Finland has many similarities to these Gulf herrings. But the Central Baltic herring populations are typical open sea herrings. And just to mention that only minor part of the older Gulf of Riga herring temporarily leaves the Gulf after the spawning season. But they mainly stay close to the Ivars Strait, so I have marked this with a dashed red line here. So they stay there, not going long way away from the Gulf. So if we go to the maturation, so the Gulf herrings, Gulf of Riga herring mature at young age and small size. On the graph you can see the one, it means that 100% of the specimens of that age class are mature. In the case of Gulf of Riga herring, there is a decreasing trend in the maturation at age, except age group 1. So if you look these lines, that they are getting down, except the first one. If you look and compare the similar pictures for Central Baltic herring and Gulf of Putnis herring, then you see the picture is rather different. There you can see the increasing trends. So both in Central Baltic herring and especially in the Gulf of Putnis, so the maturation has increased at younger age. And one special property of the Gulf of Riga herring is that they reach the final stage of maturation later than the spring, later in spring and later in autumn than Central Baltic herring, because the Gulf herring, they overwinter in colder water compared to the Central Baltic herring. So there is a longer fasting period during that time, and therefore the maturation of reproductive cells is dependent on the feeding in spring. So they need to feed first in spring and mature the cells before they can spawn. But let's say the open sea herring, they can do it already during the winter and early spring, so they can go and start spawning earlier. So I mentioned that Gulf herring is maturing or starts spawn a little bit later in spring and autumn. But each individual is spawning only once per year. And there are additionally two broad types of herring, natural populations in the Baltic Sea. There's spring spawning and autumn spawning herrings. At present in the Gulf of Riga, it's dominated by the spring spawners. The share of autumn spawners is about 1% only. But there was a time, like in the 1940s, 50s, when the share of autumn spawners was much higher. So it was close to the 50% then. But when the climate changed and there was big shifts in the Baltic, so in the salinity and temperature, So the autumn spawners disappeared more or less. So now there are only very few of them left. So the start of mass spawning of Gulf of Riga herrings starts approximately 1 month later than for the open sea herring. And here I mean that the open sea herring in the Gulf of Riga, because Central Baltic herring stock is huge. It's from the southwestern Baltic to the Gulf of Finland, and temperature is very different there, and the spawning time is very different there. But in the same area as Gulf of Riga, so you can compare same place and the timing there. So the first enter the Central Baltic herring in the Gulf and start spawn, and they do it at lower temperatures and shallower water, and then approximately 1 month later starts Gulf herring spawning, and it's a bit deeper water and with higher temperatures. And about the growth rate, Gulf of Riga herring is a slow-growing herring with one of the lowest mean length and weight at age in the Baltic. And it's due to the late spawning time and shorter feeding season. So in the graph you can see the growth rate of different Baltic herring stocks, and you see that the Western Baltic herring it's totally different because they have totally different feeding conditions. So the other three stocks they look more or less similar, but you see the red line is the Gulf of Riga herring. It's the lowest. In the beginning, the Gulf of Putnis herring is even lower because they are more far north, so they spawn also very late. That's why they have a worse start for growing, but they will make it up later on, so they grow bigger. But Gulf of Riga herring never grows big, so they stay quite small. And the final is the morphological features. The herring belonging to Gulf of Riga herring population can be easily distinguished from the Central Baltic herring by the otolith structure. Also, spring and autumn spawning herrings can easily distinguished by the otolith structure. And the Gulf of Riga herring has also slightly different body shape compared to the open sea herring. And now I move on to the importance of the assessment and management units matching the natural population structure. So as I mentioned already before, the Baltic herring is currently assessed and managed in 4 units or stocks. But there is a mismatch between the management areas and herring population structure in the Baltic. So I tried to show on this picture a little bit how the population structure might look like in the Baltic Sea. So the herring is distributed all over the Baltic Sea, forming several populations which are adapted to the local environmental conditions in the distribution area. And there has been several genetic studies for herring made in the Baltic Sea, and some of them are still going on right now. Unfortunately, the picture that the results show is not very clear. So the most distinguished genetic differences are found between the spring and autumn spawning herring populations in the Baltic. But the difference between the spring spawning herring local populations are generally rather small. So you can distinguish the Western Baltic herring substocks genetically from the other Baltic herring stocks, but it's hard to distinguish the rest of the herring stocks genetically. the Gulf of Riga herring is the only management area where there is in practice only one local herring population dominating. The distribution area of that population is well defined with the semi-enclosed gulf. The herring can be easily distinguished from the Central Baltic herring by the otolith structure, and the catches of Central Baltic herring in the Gulf of Riga and Gulf herrings outside the Gulf are taken into account in the assessment and management process. The management areas of other Baltic herring stocks include several stock components, which are also mixed with neighboring stocks. For example, in the Western Baltic spring spawning herring stock area, the stock includes several substocks, which are mixed with the stocks management area with North Sea autumn spawners and also the Central Baltic herring. And the Central Baltic herring stock is also a complex of several populations, differing slightly from each other. In different studies, there has been described 4 or 3 different components in this area. And I have one figure here, which is showing the herring which are caught in the Central Baltic herring management area, but they belong to several different populations. You can see that there is even the Western Baltic herring is there, and there is the spring spawning northern substock and spring spawning southern substock, and also the autumn spawning Central Baltic herring there. And it's a mixture of everything, and they all grow different. And to sum up, I can say that the management of combined populations faces several difficulties introduced by the complex nature of such stocks, and the assessment of parameters of joint stocks, including several local populations, which different dynamics and growth patterns, may not provide an adequate picture of the development in the subunits. Therefore, applying the natural population structure as a basis of assessment and catch advice can prevent the critical decrease in abundance and or the collapse of some exploited populations, putting the infra-specific diversity of the Baltic herring under the risk. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. So, if I summarize very quickly, then it's one or two parts of the explanation for the Gulf of Riga herring being in better condition. Is one, natural environmental situation, biological, but also management, a better match between the assessment area and where the stock is. But there might be other reasons, and we'll be hearing some more, a different perspective from Ivars Putnis, who's a researcher at the Institute for Food Safety, Animal Health and Environment in Riga. So I'll just try and get this set up here. And it would be good to get this start. So,
okay, hello everyone. Hope you can hear me well. My name is Ivars Putnis, and here today I will continue the Olavi's interesting story about the Gulf of Riga herring. This stock is quite different from the other stocks, as we already heard, and I will make my talk concerning on environmental interactions and fisheries management perspective as well. I will show what are the main probably differences if we are trying to compare with the other stocks. Okay, let's start with the simple things. External appearance, Gulf of Riga herring is quite famous looking fish in the Baltic Sea. It's the herring with a quite big head and very slim body, and it's due to lower growth rate in the Gulf of Riga area. And if we compare with the herring from the Baltic Sea southern areas, which we can see in the picture below, those herrings are like big, thick, very fast growing, and then with a good condition herrings. But in Gulf of Riga, these are quite small fishes. And Gulf of Riga ecosystem by itself is also quite interesting and different ecosystem. The main characteristics are that Gulf of Riga ecosystem is shallow. It's also brackish, influenced by the river runouts, and it's also quite productive. And in terms of food web, the food web is also quite different from the Central Baltic Sea. It has gone through many changes historically. We had those regime shifts in the Baltic Sea and in the Gulf of Riga as well, because the system is quite shallow. It reacts quite fast to a changing environment. And there were some times when cod were abundant in the Gulf of Riga, but nowadays the main boss in the system is herring, and of course the main source for commercial fishery as well. If we're trying to look at the mean weight at age, there were significant changes throughout the time. There were times when herrings were bigger in the Gulf of Riga system in the 80s. And we can see that there is a drop along the beginning of the 90s. It goes together with the common regime shift in the Central Baltic Sea. And what changes in the Gulf of Riga? I would say that the main change was in the zooplankton composition. The energetically important food item, Limna calanus, has almost gone when the water temperatures became warmer. And also the stock increased in the beginning of 80s, in the beginning of 90s, and that means the higher interspecific competition in the ecosystem. And in the recent period, the growth has been more or less stable, but of course there are some favorable and probably not so favorable years. If you are looking at the otolith structure, Olavi already demonstrate those differences, but this is also was one of the challenge for me as a young student when I start to do those age estimates, because due to this relatively slow growth rate, the winter zones are quite hard to distinguish in this Gulf of Riga stock. And on the left side, you can see the typical herring from the Central Baltic Sea, from subdivision 25. Both fishes are 7 years old, and in the Gulf of Riga case, you can see that this slow growth pattern is clearly visible on the otolith microstructure as well. And by the way, this otolith microstructure serves as the main source for determination of the population. So you don't have to do some genetic stuff analysis and so on. That's enough just to look at the otolith microstructure. And that's it. In terms of population dynamics, of course, there are many factors that influence total fish biomass and herring biomass in the Gulf of Riga ecosystem. There are positive factors like immigration, recruitment, and growth. And from the other side, of course, you have those factors that negatively affects the population. It's immigration, of course, natural mortality, and fishing mortality. And all those factors are playing together and interacting together, so we can see this clear population dynamic trend. By the way, in the upper part of the picture, it's a Gulf of Riga spawning stock biomass trend, and we can see those large-scale fluctuations that happened in history. I want to draw your attention on the spawning stock biomass graph in the lower side. As Olavi already demonstrated, the herring spawning stock biomass in the recent period is historically highest. And it almost tripled if we compare with the beginning of the time series. And on the upper part, you can see this recruitment. It's herring at age 0 throughout the years, and we can see a large scale of fluctuations in herring recruitment. And if we try to compare those two pictures, we can see that the spawning stock biomass is like more or less stable and on the high level, and by the same time you can see clear fluctuations in herring recruitment. So that means that other factors are also playing important roles in this case. Usually in classical ichthyology, it's assumed that fish recruitment is dependent on the spawner biomass, and if we are drawing such a relationship for the Gulf of Riga herring stock, we can see even some statistically significant trends. But I would say that this relationship rather works in the opposite way. If you are having good recruitment, you will have high spawning stock biomass with like 2 years time lag. So that's how it works here rather. Of course, when you have extremely low spawning stock biomass, it's you cannot expect very abundant year classes. But still, if the spawning stock biomass is very high, you can see that fluctuation in year classes also can be quite high. And here I also want to draw your attention on this old match-mismatch hypothesis that to some extent also works for this Gulf of Riga herring stock. First you have some primary production bloom, then follows zooplankton bloom in the springtime, and then it's very important what happens with the herring spawning time and whether this larval peak period overlaps with the food peak period in spring. And if there is a good match, then we can see that year class strength is very good, and we are noticing this abundant year class. And in the opposite way, if there is a mismatch between the larval herrings that starts to feed and then the zooplankton abundance, we can see that due to this mismatch we can observe poor year class in this ecosystem. And this is also something that you can follow up if you are analyzing the hydroacoustic survey results. Probably this is a bit more complicated picture, but here you can see the different age groups in years, and each cohort is assigned to the specific color. And if you are looking throughout the years, you can follow the abundance in those cohorts. And I like to compare this process like to human heartbeats. If you have good heartbeats, you will live, and the same goes for the stock. If there are abundant year classes, the stock will be in the good shape in the future. And if you are looking at the age composition in catch, we can see that the majority of herrings are in ages up to 5 years old. So basically there are not so many age groups. So that means that under conditions when due to some factors like recruitment will decrease, we will clearly soon see this effect in the population structure as well and in the catch compositions. Few words about the specific measures regarding fisheries management in the Gulf of Riga. What's important that engine power is limited. It shall not exceed 221 kilowatts at any time, and the total engine power is also limited. So that means that we can follow up the total like fishing effort that could be used in the Gulf of Riga. And there are also several trawling restrictions for the fishing gear, like vertical opening of the trawl. No demersal trawling is allowed. There are many closed areas. Basically all the areas below 20 meter depth are closed. Ivars Strait is closed as well. We can see on the map, I marked those areas in the red color, so you can see that significant part of the Gulf of Riga area is close to open sea fishery. But by the same time, there's developed coastal fishery in both countries, in Estonia and Latvia as well. Additionally, we have closed seasons for both countries. This is 30 days season in springtime, and it's also adaptive according to weather conditions and year conditions. You can change this timing of the spring closure. And in Estonia, there's also additional trawling ban from mid-June to mid-September as well. So basically, that's are the main things that are related to fisheries management. And my main conclusions and take-home messages for you would be that, as Olavi already said, that Gulf of Riga herring stock is sensitive to environmental changes, and it has benefited from recent environmental change and regime shift as well. Specific fisheries management measures are enforced in the Gulf of Riga ecosystem with the aim to protect pre-spawning shoals and also to limit the vessel power, to limit this fishing intensity in sort of fragile ecosystem of the Gulf of Riga. And what's also beneficial that only 2 countries are involved into stock assessment and fishery, and there are only few target species in the Gulf of Riga commercial fishery. And what's important that herring is mainly used for the human consumption in both of the countries. And sampling of commercial landings are also quite intensive if we compare to other Baltic Sea subdivisions. Gulf of Riga is pretty small subdivision, and still we are doing age readings for more than 10,000 of herrings per year, and we are collecting then more than 100 biological samples per year, so it's intensively sampled population. And regarding the hydroacoustic survey, scientific survey, this intensity and approach is also like several times higher than for other herring stocks, although there is only one scientific survey per year at the moment. Starting from the last year, we try to introduce the second one in the autumn time. I would also draw attention that scientific staff, we are small countries and our scientific capacity is somewhat limited, but this staff that is working with the Gulf of Riga herring, this is like with old school background, and this is quite stable stuff, and as you can try to imagine, it's very important if we are doing those age readings for those specific Gulf of Riga herrings, slow growing stock, and if you want to distinguish both populations, it's important to do it in the proper way. And we should keep in mind the future challenge that would be the climate change that already happened in the Baltic Sea and most likely will continue to happen in the future. And also we should think about the implementation of the ecosystem-based fisheries management, and probably this Gulf of Riga herring stock and this quite specific environmental conditions could be like good starting point and good case study for implementation of such measures in the Baltic Sea overall. So okay, that was main messages from my side. Thanks for attention, and I'm ready to handle some questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, and I believe that I might have forgotten in the beginning to say that you can send in questions also from the net, both via Slido and at ustuhsantum.su.se. But just Ivars, there was a lot of differences in the management also. And how important is the more detailed assessment of the ages and things like that you mentioned in terms of accuracy of the assessments of the stock? Because we've talked about that in other circumstances, that at least for the Central Baltic herring, there's been quite inaccurate when the retrospective analysis are looked at, that it's discovered that it was very different than what one was thought at the time. But is that not the case in the same way in the Gulf of Riga herring?
Well, as Olavi told, in the Gulf of Riga there's like separate herring population, and its growth pattern is more or less the same. And if we compare the Central Baltic, there are many herring populations with different growth rates, and so it could be challenging in this age assessment process. But as I said, it's a crucial part. This age estimation is a crucial part in the data preparation process. And it's also a key element into stock assessment, because all the stock assessment is done by cohorts, by age groups, and overall it's very important to have this precision in those estimates. And as I like to describe, all the process is like clock mechanism, starting from the fishermen, starting from the data collection, reporting, like statistics, and so on. And the stock assessment is only part of this clock mechanism. So if everything will work good, so we will manage to do it the best way.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any questions here in the room?
Yeah.
Not yet? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And please state your name and where you're working.
Yes. Matilda Karlsson from WWF Sweden. I was just wondering, since the biomass of the stock seems to increase, but the fish itself doesn't increase in size, what do you think this is dependent on? Like, why is that? Why aren't they increasing in size? Is it just because they've lost their important food source, or are there like other sources as well?
Yeah, there could be different factors. Of course, this is competition. This is like specific feeding conditions throughout the years. But we can see that those differences in the last period, these are not very high. There are better years, there are not so good years. But overall, yeah, we should understand that of course, there is a competition for the zooplankton as a food source in the Gulf of Riga ecosystem. And under so abundant stock, of course, it's a feeding pressure that plays a role.
I just want to add that, yes, this increased biomass is mainly because of the very much more fish in numbers. And the growth, it's depending of the food availability and also how much concurrence you have from your same size fish. And of course, you see that the growth of younger herring, it's not so bad compared to the past when there was more food and less fish in numbers. But the main drop has been in the older herring. So the old herring doesn't have any more large size zooplankton to eat, and that's why they don't gain the weight. But there is still enough food for young herring.
Yep.
Okay, I'll take one since no one else wants one. I'm Ellen Bruno, I'm from the Baltic Sea Center. I was wondering, how important do you think that there are only 2 countries actually negotiating about this stock in EU? Like, could that be one of the reasons why you've kept the low fishing pressure, or have they actually been fighting against each other?
So have the countries been agreed to keep the fishing pressure and the management the way that it is?
Yeah, in Estonia, there is a like expression is the spread war, which actually was meant about the Gulf of Riga herring. So basically, there was a small fight between Latvia and Estonia at the beginning, but when they settled down how they share the quotas, then it's fixed. So, and they tried to work together and cooperate. So the management measures, they are very similar in both countries. So there has been negotiations to have it the same way. Otherwise, it makes no sense. If Estonia is only protecting and Latvia just fishing at the same time, it makes no sense. So it makes only sense when everybody do the same way. And yeah, it makes much easier if you have only one country to negotiate with, not like 10 different interests around the table.
Okay, we have another question here.
Yes, hello, and thank you so much for your interesting presentations. My name is Therese Börjesson, and I am from the Swedish Society for Nature Conservation. So you had quite a lot of different measures when it comes to management. You had closed areas and time-bound trawling bans and so on, and also control. What would you recommend to the management of the rest of the herring stocks in the Baltic when it comes to these specific measures? Would you have any recommendations? Because obviously you're doing something right.
Yeah, $1 million question, I guess. But the one probably key point could be on the probably we should look more detailed on the population structure by itself. There are many recent research that suggests that probably there are many subpopulations in the central Baltic area that can react differently to environmental pressures. So probably, yeah, in the future we should look into this population structure and introduce some spatial measures or do some more detailed assessment even on some smaller population level.
I thought also that basically the situation in the Gulf of Riga is not so different from the Gulf of Botnia herring. So basically it would be practically possible to try to do something similar there because there is only 2 countries. The herring is in the Gulf. It's not going out or not very much out from there. And it it would be possible to separate and to manage the stock more or less similar way. But let's say the biggest difference for me in the Gulf of Riga is that all these measures are made to protect the spawning stock or the spawning pre-spawning schools, not to allow trawlers go and fish when the fish is easiest to catch just before the spawning, when they are schooling 10 schools. It's easy to go and take them, and there is no fish going in spawning. And there's also big difference how the quotas are given to fishermen. So for example, in Estonia, the quota is split almost 50-50 between the troll fisheries and the coastal fisheries. So there is almost 50% of the herring is taken by the coastal fishermen in the coastal zone when the fish is spawning. But it's okay because they catch with trap nets, and fish is spawning in the trap nets. So this is also there is recruitment coming from that row also. It's not that they kill the fish before they can spawn.
Okay, well, that was a very interesting answers to a very good question that I was thinking of myself. This is normally the question that we ask towards the end, but not this time. Do we have time for one more question, and also for Ellen to say something about the next Baltic Breakfast? Barbara?
So, is it on? So I'm Barbara Müller-Karolis from the Baltic Sea Center, and I have one question to you both. Oh, sorry. I have one question to you both. The Gulf of Riga is the only system that limits the vessel power for the trawlers that can fish there. Is that a crucial component, or does it make it easier to control the fishery, or why do you want to keep that, or can you recommend that for other countries as well?
Yeah, probably I will start. Yeah, this is a good point, and probably this could also be one of the recommendations. And there are some rumors that trolling success depends on the troll size, but actually with the small trawler you are not able to deploy very large size troll. So actually this vessel power limitation to some extent limits the troll that is possible to use. Yeah, if there would not be such a restriction, there would be an option for the fishermen to use larger trolls and to move faster and so on. So probably this is also one of crucial points in the fragile ecosystem management.
Yeah, I just thought that I forgot to mention that issue. This is actually very important. And I see that this limitation makes it so that troll fishing is spread all over the year more or less equally. So if you have the fish stock, so it's like a soup, and then with troll you take the samples from there, and it's most efficient is to have huge gears and go and fish the quota as fast as possible. Then it's economically makes most profit and sense. But it's not good for fish because the distribution of fish changes throughout the year. And for example, in the Central Baltic, they target pre-spawning schools and take them most of the fish there, and this hurts the stocks. But in the Gulf of Riga, it's spread all over the year, so I think it's better for fish stocks.
Okay, thank you very much, and thanks for the questions. We will be, I think, returning to this topic, but in the meantime...
Welcome to the next Baltic Breakfast on the 14th of December, which will be an extended Christmas version of Baltic Breakfast. So we will talk about how are the 9 big animals in the Baltic doing, actually. 3 mammals, 3 birds, and 3 fish species.
Okay.
Yes?
Okay, thanks a lot, and I think that pretty much wraps it up. Thanks to all of you who came, and thanks to those of you who watched also, and thanks to those of you who will be watching in the future, because this will be also on our web. You can look at it afterwards. Okay? So that's it. Bye. Bye.